Hey y'all, it's just Jennifer. Thank you for coming to my book talk again. So I think if you watched last week's video, I mentioned about being in a huge romantic suspense mood right now. That hasn't really been broken. And I mentioned that for a reason. I'll explain that in a few minutes. Well, let me first start off with talking about some books that I got to read in the past week. Now, last week I mentioned that I had just started Hidden Peril. I can actually pronounce it today. I don't know what my deal was last week. Hidden Peril, which was, I did again. Wait, anyways, just ignore me. It's been a day. Anyway, so this is the second in a series. I think I mentioned that last week. The first one was called Dangerous Illusions, and it was about Colin and Trish, and Trish is having like these memory lapses, and she thinks she might have accidentally contributed to her mother's death by giving her too much medication. But the more that Colin kind of digs into this death, the more he realizes that maybe Trish is being set up. And there was like this huge twist, and by the time I began to suspect something was up, my mind was blown. Alright, y'all. I highly recommend that you read that. It's called Buried Secrets, and it's on Kindle Unlimited. And it's really good. This is a sequel, and this is about Colin's friend, Kristen. Now, what you find out in the first book is that Colin, his friend Kristen, and his friend Rick were all in a group that they called the Treehouse Gang. And when they were kids, they had made a vow that they were going to make the world a better place. So Colin became a police detective. And Kristen has a store that sells fair trade goods. But some people who are attached to the store begin to die mysteriously. And Kristen kind of gets caught up in it unexpectedly. And the detective, Luke Carter, is Colin's colleague and is brand new to the city. And he relocated a few years after his wife's death. So he's a grieving widow. He isn't really expecting to find love. But he ends up getting involved in Kristen's case. And it becomes such a big deal that they have to pull in the FBI. And there is a name in this book that you might recognize from one of Irene Hannon's former books. I actually haven't got to read it yet. But it's called In Harm's Way. And it's now at the library. I put it on hold. I just gotta go pick it up. But it's about Nick. So if you read In Harm's Way by Irene Hannon, you're going to see Nick again in this book. But like I said, there was this... Yes, Michelle, Buried Secrets was the first one in this series. It was so good. I think Colin might be my favorite Irene Hannon character so far. I don't know. But anyways, this has a huge twist that I didn't really expect. And by the time I figured it out, I was just like, oh my gosh, and I was just flipping pages as fast as I could. Irene Hannon really knows how to heap on the drama and how to build up the suspense until the end. And let me tell you, the end was big. And you're going to want to read this one. And I don't want to say any more because I will probably end up giving it away. But I cannot stop reading this book. And I stayed up really late in order to finish it. And I may have procrastinated on some work in order to get it done. But it was worth it. So the second book I read was also an Irene Hannon book. I actually read the first book of the series this week as well. And it was on Kindle Unlimited. And let me make sure I'm going to call it the right thing. It's called Fatal Judgment. In this series, it's called Guardians of Justice. It's about the Taylor siblings, 2 brothers and a sister. The first book is about Jake Taylor, and he is a U.S. Marshal. And he's called in to protect a judge. And he doesn't really like said judge for a reason. There's a history there. But he begins to realize that his preconceptions were a little bit wrong. And Liz Michaels isn't who he thought he was. And he's trying to protect her from a killer. And that one was really good. I liked Jake. Jake was a good, strong hero. But Liz, I felt like, was strong in her own right. And you know who the killer is. You know who is after her. But the climax was completely unexpected. It came like out of left field. I wasn't expecting things to happen the way that they happened. And it was so good. It was so good. Now, the second one in the series is about the sister Allison, who is a social services worker. I haven't got to read that yet. It's on hold at the library. I'm waiting for it to come in. But this one was already here, so I decided just to go ahead and read this one. And this one is about their brother Cole, and he is a detective. And this woman comes in claiming that she has found evidence that her father did not, in fact, commit suicide. He was murdered. And Cole is a little skeptical at first, but then he ends up finding out that the father was involved in something that the daughter doesn't even know about. And he realized that the daughter's right. The father was murdered. And the killer ends up coming after the daughter. And so he's got to protect her. And this is another book that had a twist in it that by the time I realized it was coming, I was just kind of like thrown for a loop. And you figure it out kind of early on. Irene Hannon goes ahead and lets you in on it by the second third of the book. And then you're just sitting there waiting for Cole to figure it out and seeing what's going to happen next. And there's some things that happen that you realize that it's going to not turn out very well, and your gut begins to churn, and you're sitting there flipping pages trying to get to the end to figure out how the good guys win. So this was another winner by Irene Hannon. It's really good, and I loved it. Okay, and then I read another book by Elizabeth Goddard called Deception. Now this one is part of a series. It's part of the Mountain Coat series. But this is the first one I've read in the series. And I looked in the inside cover and found out that it's actually the 6th book in the series. However, I was able to follow everything in this book with no problem. But it's about a woman named Jewel, and she owns a B&B, and someone tries to kill her. And she thinks it's because of a secret in her past. And she's afraid to come clean about the secret, but she's pretty sure that's the reason why she's being targeted. And so the hero is Colin Winters, and he is the police chief of the town of Mountain Cove, and he is trying to protect her, but he can tell she's holding something back. And he tries to get her to tell him the secret. But this was good. But let me say something about Elizabeth Goddard. I like her more recent books that I think they were published by Revell. One of them was called, I think, Always Look Twice. Another one was Never Let Go. They're longer. And I think one of the reasons I liked those better was because since they were longer, Elizabeth Goddard had a lot more time to develop these characters. Whereas in these books that are a bit shorter, there isn't as much time to develop those characters. But she did a good job making me like Joel and Colin. I wanted Joel and Colin to be together. I could see why they worked. And I tell you what, there was a lot of stuff happening. Like, you could not go through a chapter without something happening. Very fast paced, which is good. It kept my attention. I wanted to keep reading it. I had a hard time putting it down. I just think some of her more recent ones were better. And it probably was because I just liked those characters better in her more recent ones. But this one was still really good. I am intrigued to read the other ones in the series. I don't know if this was the last one. I just saw it at the library and I picked it up because it had her name on it. She's one of those authors for me. If I see her name on it, I'm going to read it and it's probably going to be good. And I am interested to read some of the other ones if I can get a hold of them. Because there were a few characters mentioned in here and you kind of got a hint that they might have had a book previously. And there's one character in particular that's one of Joel's best friends that I'm intrigued to read her story because apparently she had a stalker. And I'm curious to see how that worked out. So this is really good. Once again, it's called Deception and I do recommend it. So now we're going to get into the TBR section. Now, this weekend I had some plans canceled. And so I decided to go to the library and check out a lot of books. Okay, this is the first stack. These are all love-inspired suspense. Every single one of them. Some of them are by Elizabeth Goddard. Some of them are by Maggie K. Black. I read a few of her books on Kindle. They were available on Kindle Unlimited, and they were really good. Definitely held my attention. She managed to get me interested in those characters pretty easily, to stick with them through all the stuff that happens. And then there's a book by, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce her name right, Virginia Vaughn, maybe? I've heard of her. And so when I saw that my library had this one, I grabbed it because I wanted to read it and see what her books were like. She recently had one that came out, I think like last month. I forgot what it was called. But she is a member of the Suspense Squad. And if you don't know what the Suspense Squad is, just go Google the Suspense Squad and you can find their webpage. And it is a group of authors who write suspense. Some of them are pre-published. Like they're working on their manuscripts. They have an agent shopping them out. They just haven't found a publisher yet. Some of them, like Virginia, have already been published. And I highly recommend you go check them out. I'm a little bit biased because I have a friend in that group, Ho Welburn. She won the Genesis contest this year. So she will one day be famous. But I'm very intrigued to see what kind of a writer Virginia Vaughn is. I feel like I'm going to like her. And this one, I didn't even bother reading the little blurb. I just saw her name and I grabbed it. And I'm not going to read like every single one of these because that would be very long indeed. However, I am going to mention this one book. It's called Undercover Protector by Elizabeth Goddard. And one of the reasons why I'm going to mention it is because it's the sequel to a book I've mentioned previously on Book Talk called, let me double check that again, Targeted for Murder. This one is about the brother. I think in the first book the hero was named Cooper Wilde. And this is about his brother, Grayson Wilde, who is a special agent. And he's undercover at a tiger sanctuary. So, I don't know, if you were one of those that were really into the Tiger King and you thought that was interesting, this might be a book that you might like. I don't know. I haven't read it yet. And when I do read it, I will let you know how it is. And if it's good, I mean, it's written by Elizabeth Goddard. It's going to be good. But I didn't just get romantic suspense. I got some romance books as well. They're all by Irene Hannon. I was at my library and I happened to see that they had more of the Hope Harbor series. And I mentioned Hope Harbor, I can't even remember. It was either last week or the week before by Irene Hannon. It's on Kindle Unlimited. And it was about a widow and a widower. And the widower was named Michael. And he comes to Hope Harbor because his wife had used to vacation there as a child. And she wanted to go there on vacation. And he kept putting her off because of work. And then she died unexpectedly. And it's been 18 months. And he takes some time off work to come to Hope Harbor in grief. And he ends up meeting a widow. And they're working together on a nonprofit. And he also helps her on her family cranberry farm. And they end up falling in love. And it was really good. It was poignant at times because both of the main characters had some guilt over their past marriages. What really got me, though, was the subplot. The subplot character, I think her name was Anne. And she was an older woman. And her and her son have become estranged after her husband died. And she ends up taking in the main character, Michael, because he reminds her of her son. And so that story of reconciliation was just really good. And it hit me in the heart. And it was just one of those books that just kind of like, it just sticks with your soul. And you just have to keep reading it because you just want to know that the characters are okay. And that everything's going to turn out right. And you just know that they need a happily ever after. And you want to read their happy ending. And it was worth it. So anyways, so when I saw that my library had some more books in that series, I knew that I had to get a hold of them. Now, I mentioned before, I've read Driftwood Bay, which is later on in this series. I don't know exactly what number it is. And she's fixing to come out with another one. So I'm kind of backtracking, but that's okay. Because I've been able to do that so far because Hope Harbor kind of stood alone, and Driftwood Bay stood alone. There was a mention of a few characters, but didn't delve into them so deeply that you had a bunch of spoiler alerts. So if you come across one of the Hope Harbor series and you haven't read any of the other ones, just go ahead and pick it up and read it because it's probably going to be good. But the second book is called Sea Rose Lane, and it is about an architect named B.J. Stevens, and B.J. Stevens is a friend of the heroine from the first book. So, like, her name is mentioned, but you don't meet B.J. quite yet. So I'm very intrigued to read this one. It says, after a devastating layoff, attorney Eric Nash heads back to Hope Harbor, only to discover that his childhood home is being transformed into a bed and breakfast. Instead of plotting his next career move in peace, he's constantly distracted by noise, chaos, and B.J. Stevens, the attractive but prickly blonde architect who's invaded the house with her motley crew. As for B.J., her client's son might be handsome, but after a disastrous romance, dating isn't high on her agenda. Yet when they join forces to help Hope Harbor's older residents, might they also find healing, hope, and a new beginning themselves. So this is I'm probably going to start this book tonight, actually, because I haven't really been feeling very well today, so I don't want to push myself too hard on work, because I find when I do that, I end up getting sicker. And we have a little bit of a bug going around in my family, and I found reading relaxes me. Unless I'm reading a suspense novel, and then I'm not feeling very relaxed, because I'm trying to make sure the characters stay alive. But, I definitely plan on reading this one soon. Irene Hannon is she's one of those authors that I found that I can go to, whether I'm in the mood for suspense or romance or whatever it is, and I'm going to enjoy what I read by her. So I'm very much excited to read this one. The next book is called Sandpiper Cove. I won't read the whole blurb for this one, but it is about a police chief and an ex-con. So that's going to be interesting. And I have to say, one of the things I appreciate about Irene Hannon books is that there is sometimes kind of like a will they, won't they? But the characters, once they make a decision, they tend to stick with it. There's not a whole lot of, wishy-washy, changed minds. I mean, there's going to be some struggles. There's going to be some conflicts that they have to overcome, usually. But, they aren't going to declare their love for each other and then 3 pages later take it back. I always find that annoying in romances. To me, it feels very immature. But that's just me. And then the next book that I got is called Pelican Point. It is the 4th one, I think. Let me double check that. Yes, it is the 4th one. And it is about Army Doctor Ben Garrison and Marcy Weber, who is the editor of Hope Harbor Herald. Now, Marcy, I remember her name from Driftwood Bay. She's just kind of like briefly mentioned as a side character. So I am very interested to read this book and see how her relationship with Ben develops. So that's very exciting. I love when you get to revisit characters that you like, and I've noticed with Irene Hannon's suspense novels, she tends to do that a lot. She'll have a character maybe mentioned in one book that had a book in a previous series or something. And so whenever you see those names pop up, it kind of makes you excited because you're like, I know them. And with her romantic suspense books, I've kind of been going back and forth between series as I get a hold of the books, especially for the ones that are available on Kindle Unlimited. And that might bother some people, and if you're one of them, like, I wouldn't do that. Like, I met Cole Taylor in this book right here, Hidden Peril, before I read Lethal Legacy. But that actually kind of just made me more eager to read Lethal Legacy. So it didn't really spoil anything for me. There wasn't like some big thing about what happened with Kelly. There was just a brief mention where he knew that Luke had a crush on Kristen because Luke talked to her with a very warm tone that wasn't necessarily professional. And Cole could sympathize with that because he says, you know, I had a case like that once. So, you can read her series out of order. That was kind of the whole point of that rant. But you can read them out of order. It's not going to bother you. You're still going to enjoy them. And I am very much looking forward to reading some more of her Hope Harbor series. Now, she does have some love-inspired romances and romantic suspense. She's written for both lines. I have not read them yet, but I am intrigued. And then I think she has a few standalone novels that I happened to see also at the library that I just haven't grabbed yet because I'm into series right now and I'm just kind of going crazy. But anyways, so that's all that I have for today. I will let you know next week about some more of these books and what I thought about them. If you missed my review this past Friday, scroll through my timeline to find the link. It's Joy to the World, a Regency Christmas collection. And if you are in the mood for some Christmas, let me tell you, this collection is going to bring it to you. The titles of each novella are taken from the hymn Joy to the World. Each one has a really great spiritual message. You're definitely going to love it, especially if you love Regency. If you've read Erica Vetch's novels, The Lost Lieutenant or The Gentleman's Spy, you're definitely going to get your hands on this collection because her story in it is connected to that series and it's very good. I do kind of wish it was longer because I just didn't want to leave the characters quite yet, especially Hamish. I love a good Scotsman. But Amanda Barrett's story was really good. It was about a scarred veteran. And I don't know. I have a soft spot for veterans anyway, especially when I read about them in literature. It was kind of almost like a Beauty and the Beast take a little bit. But the heroine, Jenny, I felt like was a good model for how we Christians should be showing our light. And I'm not saying Jenny was perfect, 'cause she wasn't. She definitely had flaws. But when she goes to talk about Christ to Dwight, she doesn't just leave it at a discussion. She actually tries to live out her faith so he can see it. And I really appreciated that. And then Carolyn Miller's story is a great one about misunderstandings and second chances. And those are themes that I can always get behind in Christian fiction because I feel like our love should mimic Christ's love as much as possible. And his love is all about forgiveness and second chances. And sometimes we kind of get these ideas in our head when it comes to Christ that aren't necessarily true. And we think that we have come too far, but we never ever have. So I highly recommend that. You can also go to www.justjenniferpurcell.com and click on blog, and you can read some more of my book reviews for some other books that I have up there if you just need some book recommendations. If you have Kindle Unlimited, look up Joanna Davidson Politano. That's Politano. I have a review on the blog for her latest book, The Love Note. But there are a couple of other books on Kindle Unlimited written by her. And she writes fantastic historical fiction. Always has a romantic element. So far I've only read 2. But there's another book on Kindle Unlimited that I'm hoping to be able to read soon. So I highly recommend her. But anyways, I will talk to you some more about books next week. And I hope y'all have a wonderful night and a great week. Thank you.